Today we're going to be talking about a young man who, if you are into the photography sphere and you want to know some more history about photography in general, this is a man that I feel is fairly important, especially if you are into military history, especially the history of the Marine Corps. You will want to stick around for this video. So today we're going to be talking about a man named William T. Perkins Jr. Born on August 10th, 1947, William Thomas Perkins Jr. would be born in Rochester, New York, to his father, William, clearly, and his mother, Marilyn Perkins. Growing up, young William and his younger brother Robert would be told stories of their family's rich military background. With William's great-grandfather having served during the United States Civil War, Private John O'Leary served in Battery L of the 1st New York Light Artillery from December of 1861 to December of 1864. In those years, he would participate in battles of Antietam as well as Gettysburg. William's grandfather, Captain Henry T. Perkins, was in command of U.S. Army Special Projects Group of Chemical Warfare Service in Guadalcanal, as well as William's father also having served during World War II as a bomber pilot. He had flown 33 missions as a B-24 Liberator bomber pilot with the 15th Air Force stationed in Italy. During his 4th mission over Vienna, Austria, his aircraft would be struck by German flak fire, damaging 2 of the 4 engines, forcing him to land in German-occupied Yugoslavia. He and his crew had evaded capture for 3 weeks before eventually returning back to their home base. Now, hearing these stories growing up of heroic family members and the stories of their time in combat, I'm sure made a huge impact and later inspired young William T. Perkins to join the United States Marine Corps later in life. But before we get to that point, let's talk about his time in high school. So in 1960, the Perkins family decided to pack up and move from Rochester, New York to a small suburb of this word. It's no longer called this anymore. You would know it now as the North Hills in Los Angeles. This is where young William would attend James Monroe High School. While attending high school, William would discover a number of different hobbies in which he took interest in, such as skiing, swimming, skin and scuba diving, acting, and photography. After expressing interest in photography, William's father, William Sr., would gift his son a 35mm Kodak camera. I can't tell you what model. It doesn't specify in any source I've been able to find. I'm not really sure. If you do know what it is, please leave it in the comments. It sounded like it would be more like a Kodak Brownie camera, like the one I have just back here with the big flash unit on it. I don't think that's what he would have had because I don't believe those shot 35mm. And if they had a back for it that did, then I'm just out of the loop and I don't know. His father nonetheless gifted him a 35mm Kodak camera, and there's an enormous list of those cameras in which they could be. I couldn't figure out which one it was in particular. But during this time, William would also take a membership position in his school's photography club. After graduating high school in 1965, Perkins enrolled at Los Angeles Pierce College to study photography. Meanwhile, enhancing his acting skills as an apprentice with the Valley Music Theater and performing at the Century City Playhouse. He even applied and was accepted into the University of California, Los Angeles in their cinematography program, relatively new at the time. Although he was waitlisted for a year, during that year, Perkins and his good friend, James Pretty, were skipping class and headed to the beach where they had spotted a recruitment billboard featuring the famous James Montgomery flag painting of Uncle Sam. This image here. Pretty, after seeing this, would break the silence in the vehicle, stating that they should both join the Marine Corps. Later that afternoon, both men were then enlisted into the Marine Corps Reserves under the Buddy Program, which is a program in the Marine Corps where you and a buddy sign up at the same time. You guys will go to the same training regiment and you'll be in the same, you guys will both be Lima Company platoon 3250 or 3251 or whatever. You train together until you get out to the fleet. On July 6th, both men were sworn into the regular Marine Corps. The following day, Perkins wrote home to his parents and younger brother, seeming hopeful and excited in his letter. To see the full correspondence between him and his parents, go to usmcu.edu. I'll have a link in the description that you can follow as well if you'd like to go read along with this or read them before I go to the story. There's a few of the letters, and some of them are fairly lengthy. During the duration of boot camp, Perkins and Pretty would continue to make jokes and try to make light of their dire situation, meaning Marine Corps boot camp in the 1960s. I mean, we've probably all seen the film full metal jacket. That's fairly accurate. But like I had stated earlier, this was Marine Corps boot camp in the 1960s, so I'm assuming that joking was not at an all-time high, and the punishments, I'm assuming, were fairly severe. During his time in boot camp, Perkins and Pretty would take a very large swath of intelligence and aptitude tests. These tests were used to determine more or less your role in the Marine Corps, what would best suit you as an MOS. This is how they would determine your job before the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, or as you may know it now, and everybody who goes in still takes it, call it the ASVAB. Depending on your score, your GT score can depend on what you need to qualify for certain jobs. This was before that test was implemented into the armed services. Perkins and Pretty both scored fairly well on their tests, so they were granted a follow-on interview with an NCO, or a non-commissioned officer, which is an E4 and above in the United States Marine Corps. This is what Perkins had to say in a letter to his family in regard to the tests and the interview. They took us in for an interview. Then some of us went for another interview. I told them I wanted to be a photographer and told them I had experience in school and on my own. A sergeant interviewed me and asked a bunch of questions, and then got specific and asked about photographic developing and printing. I answered 7 out of 8 correct. While I guess he thought I was okay, he said he doesn't guarantee anything, but I will probably get assigned as a photographer. Well, that sure made me happy, but I'm trying to not get my hopes up because it's only one guy say so, and he probably and didn't guarantee anything. Well, I hope I have some good luck with me so I can get that job. And after graduating from MCRD San Diego in September, Perkins took 20 days of leave and then was shipped to individual combat training with 3rd Battalion 2nd Infantry Training Regiment in Camp Pendleton, California, where after he had completed his training, he was given follow-on orders to Headquarters Battalion Marine Corps Supply Center in Barstow, California. Perkins recalled this time as dull and unfulfilling as he was not naturally a stills photographer, even saying to his family, "All I do is take photos of the general in parades." In fall of 1966, Perkins would request assignment to the U.S. Army Signal Center in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, where his command responded in favor of him going, but told him that his next orders would most certainly be to Vietnam. I'm in Vietnam now. Upon graduating from the motion picture school in April, Perkins returned to Barstow, California before being shipped to Vietnam. He had arrived in Da Nang on July 17th of 1967, where he informed his family of his whereabouts, stating in a letter that he wrote to them, "Dear Mom, Dad, and Bob, I know this is going to be probably quite a shock to you, and I probably should have told you sooner, but I'm in Vietnam now. I could have told you sooner, but I couldn't stand all the tears and everyone moping around like it was the end of the world. Everyone thinks it's such a big deal over here, like you're supposed to get shot at off the plane. Humbug. This just shows how the papers play it up big and how ignorant the public is. I'm going to be with the 3rd Marine Division Photo Lab in Phu Bai. We'll stay here in Da Nang for the night and move out tomorrow by C-130 or helicopter. You probably heard the Da Nang airstrip got mortared Friday. We heard the same thing in Okinawa and expected to see the place demolished. You can't even see any evidence of it except for an Air Force ammo dump, which was hit on the perimeter. I don't want to make it all sound rosy over here because it isn't. It's just that you don't have to worry in a large compound like Chu Lai, Da Nang, Phu Bai, Hue, or Saigon because it is so well protected. Hardly anyone carries weapons around the base except for guys who are just coming off of missions, so it's pretty secure. The worst thing about this plane isn't the VC, or the Viet Cong, but it's the heat. You sweat 24 hours a day, just like Okinawa. In fact, Okinawa seems more humid than here. Speaking of Okinawa, I found Jim Pretty, and we went out to town Friday night and had the greatest time I think I've ever had. Jim has it nice over there as far as liberty goes. Since I've gotten to my unit, yet I can't tell you my address, I'll still mail this right away so you aren't wondering where I am. I guess me being here is going to take some time getting used to for all of us. But don't worry about me. As long as it doesn't get over 130 degrees, I'll be fine. Well, I'd better go to chow now. I'll put an address on the envelope, but don't send me a letter until you get my complete address. I'm sure you have a million questions, so write them down and I'll answer them. Love, Butch. P.S. Again, I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, but I really thought I'd be in Okinawa at least 2 or 3 more weeks. Perkins arrived that following day in Phu Bai, assigned as a photographer to Service Company Headquarters Battalion at 3rd Marine Division. Perkins' assignments took him to Da Nang, Cam Lao, and Hue. He was also assigned to work in the development labs where he would develop still prints. In a letter he wrote July 27th, Perkins stated, "We get a lot of work in because we have 9 still photographers whose film we develop and only 25 motion picture, including me, people. All of our motion picture film is 16mm Ektachrome color and is sent to Washington, D.C. to be developed. They send a print back to you to see your footage. All still stuff is developed here, black and white and color slides. Black and white cameras are mostly 35mm with some 2.25 by 2.25 and 4x5 speed graphic film. Our biggest developing and printing assignment is aerial photography, which we rarely shoot, but is always sent to us for processing. I'm the one who prints most of it. One good thing, our print room is in a portable van and is air conditioned, which I bet in July in Vietnam, I'm sure is pretty nice to have air conditioning. Perkins was issued a Bell & Howell 16mm film motion picture camera, along with his .45 caliber automatic pistol, more than likely an M1911, which was, I'm pretty sure, the common handgun issued to Marines at the time. Perkins would also carry his own 35mm still camera, the same Kodak camera his father had gifted him many years ago. Although after getting a promotion to Corporal, he would buy a Canon single lens reflex camera, later buying another one and sending it to his father as a thank you for giving him the Kodak camera in the first place. With this Canon camera, Perkins would photograph the people of Vietnam as well as his fellow Marines, and he would mail his exposed black and white film slides to his family with specific instructions on how to keep the dust and the moisture off of his slides. Even noting in one of these rolls sent back stated, "They frown on you using government materials to develop your own film," meaning he absolutely tried this and got his ass chewed for doing it, which, I mean, I have to kind of respect. These still photos would become the focus of Perkins' letters home, in which he wrote on September 12th, 1967, "P.S. I'm expecting my prints and slides in the mail, hint hint." 15 September of 1967, "Excuse me, but I'd like to correct you on something. You can call my photos snaps or snapshots. I cringe every time I hear that. It's like calling a rifle a gun, if you know what I mean. Snapshots are taken with a little brownie box camera like the one back behind me I showed you earlier." He keeps stating in these that he's very, very obsessive over his photography, which I get. I completely understand. I have drives full of photos. I also have film cameras with film still loaded in them, just laying around in my house. So I understand. I get where he could be getting annoyed not getting them back, but you got to remember this is also mailed to Vietnam in the 1960s. Operation Medina. During Operation Medina, Perkins received an assignment to film Marine forces in the field. A quick description for Operation Medina for those of you who don't know. Operation Medina was a search and destroy operation conducted from the 11th to the 20th of October in 1967 in the Hai Lang Forest Reserve south of Hoang Thai, South Vietnam. On October 11th, Perkins would arrive in LZ Dove. After securing the perimeter and regrouping, they moved towards their first objective, loaded with extra gear and guns. The men marched slowly and methodically. After several hours, the column came to a small river. Perkins the entire time was filming the Marines from various angles. On October 12th, the NVA forces ambushed the lead element of 3rd Platoon on a jungle trail, utilizing grenades, machine gun fire, as well as sniper fire. As the 1st Platoon had established a defensive perimeter behind 2nd and 3rd Platoons on the higher ground of a knoll adjacent to the hill, Marines using explosives and chainsaws cut out a makeshift LZ to land medevac helicopters. Perkins took up a position on the perimeter of the LZ with 3 other Marines, striking up a conversation about California life in an attempt to break the tension of the moment. The UH-34 medevac helicopters arrived to fly out the 11 wounded and 1 KIA from the initial ambush. Perkins filmed the entire operation as the wounded were loaded into the birds. And as the final medevac helicopter faded into the dusk light, all hell broke loose at their landing zone. Charlie Company was immediately ambushed by 3 NVA companies on 2 sides. Concussion grenades as well as fragmentation grenades began raining onto the Marine positions. The NVA soldiers had tied themselves high into the trees and were releasing grenades. Charlie Platoon's company commander, Captain William D. Major, ordered the 1st Lieutenant Jack A. Ruffer to plug the gap. Now under fire from 3 sides, 1st Lieutenant Ruffer cried out over the gunfire, "Let's go get some," as he screamed the Marine Corps hymn at the top of his lungs. Feeling motivated by many other Marines joining in, Perkins, equipped with his sidearm, would also join in the act of hyper-aggression they were showing. The NVA pulled back their advance and were eventually pushed from the LZ perimeter. After Ruffer's charge, Perkins made his way back up to the log position on the perimeter of the landing zone. As he settled into his position again for the night, enemy grenades began rolling down the hill of the knoll on the backside of their position. Suddenly, an enemy grenade would appear flying through the air, only illuminated by another explosion of a nearby grenade. Perkins and one other Marine saw the grenade as it fell. Perkins would call out, "Incoming grenade." As the grenade landed behind the log, Perkins would dive onto the grenade, sucking the grenade into his chest in order to shield his fellow Marines from the blast. Perkins absorbed the brunt of the blast, as only a few feet away, 2 other Marines were injured by some of the shrapnel that did not enter Corporal Perkins' body. As a fellow Marine treated 2 of the wounded men next to him, a corpsman came up to Corporal Perkins and assessed the damage. One of the wounded Marines asking, "Is he all right?" And the corpsman just sat and shook his head. Charlie Company continued to hold out against an intense enemy gunfire for the remainder of the night. Between 2100 and 2200 hours, Delta Company would push to reinforce Charlie Company. Together, the 2 companies were able to repel the NVA attack after 4 hours of sustained combat. On the morning of October 13th, 8 Marines, including Perkins, would be considered KIA, 39 men wounded, 40 enemy lay dead, scattered throughout the LZ. A Marine located Perkins' Bell and Howell camera, riddled by shrapnel. The following day, the Marines policed up the LZ and prepared to destroy any unstable equipment, piling everything into a heap and wiring with explosives. Just prior to detonation, combat artist Major A. Michael Leahy, who had arrived at the LZ the day prior, spotted a suspicious green corpsman bag amongst the pile. After inspection, he had found that it was actually full of Perkins' undeveloped film from his time with Charlie Company. Leahy would return to Fubai to Marine Corps headquarters to preserve the film he had shot showing Charlie Company's actions days prior to the attack. Medal of Honor. On the 27th of November of 1967, after review of his case at 3rd Marine Division headquarters, the Navy Cross recommendation from his chain of command had reached the desk of Lieutenant General Frank C. Theron, the acting commanding general of Fleet Marine Forces in the Pacific. General Theron, after reviewing the recommendation from Corporal Perkins' command, noted that he was probably in requirements for the Medal of Honor. He then requested further investigation into Perkins' case. 2 weeks later, Headquarters 3rd Marine Division Photographic Officer 1st Lieutenant James E. Taylor provided key information and evidence to the 3rd Marine Division's awards officer. Specifically, that Perkins had been assigned a pistol and wore a Zodiac watch, which he wore the night of the attack. The watch was recovered from his body and then sent back to his family in California. In light of this new information, General Robert E. Cushman Jr., commanding general of the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force, recommended to the Secretary of the Navy, Paul R. Ignatius, that Perkins be awarded the Medal of Honor. In a private ceremony at the White House on June 20th of 1969, President Richard M. Nixon presented Corporal Perkins' posthumous Medal of Honor to William Perkins Sr. and his mother, Marilyn Perkins. As part of the ceremonies, Major Leahy also had presented the family a painting titled Medina Photographer, depicting Perkins fording the small stream on the way to the landing zone before he met the end of his life. Even over 50 years after his heroic sacrifice, Perkins' actions continue to inspire Marine Corps combat photographers to this day. On April 11th of 1972, the Marine Corps again honored Corporal Perkins by dedicating the 2nd Marine Division Photographic Laboratory at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina in his honor. In 1970, the U.S. Marine Corps Combat Correspondents Association created the Corporal William T. Perkins Jr. Memorial Chapter, and in 2005 established the Corporal William T. Perkins Award for Combat Cameraman of the Year, featuring a statuette of Perkins kneeling with his Bell and Howell camera. Perkins' camera, bearing the scars of the enemy grenade that ended his life in Highland Forest, is preserved in the collection of the National Museum of the Marine Corps. In the Medal of Honor section of the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History exhibition, The Price of Freedom: Americans at War, visitors can view Perkins' Medal of Honor and Purple Heart. Films from Perkins' time in Vietnam remain available for viewing at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. This has been the story of a young cameraman who sacrificed his life saving his fellow Marines. A company full of people he didn't know, and the only time he had ever spent with them was in country, and he was just assigned as a photographer. Without his film, some may never know the full scope of Charlie Company's actions the days prior and or during Operation Medina. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you do enjoy the video, please like and subscribe. If you have any comments to give for other interesting photographers that you may want me to cover, any recommendations of other photographers that you'd like me to cover, whether it be military, non-military, war photographers, street photographers, it's up to you. Just leave their name in the comments and I'll Google them as fast as I can. I hope you guys all have an amazing day. Please like and subscribe, and as always, it always gets better. Love y'all. Peace.